Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Who are we? We're the South Tyrolean Observatory for Sustainable Tourism, the STOST. And I hope I can give you some insights into some practical issues or some practical details on how we measure this issue or how we measure employment on our local level. But first, I think it's important to understand a little bit our context. We are an INSA observatory since 2018, so it's the 5th year now that we are part of the INSTA network. We are the Center for Advanced Studies, or it's part of a private research institute called Eurac Research, and we work together with 2 local partners, so the EDM South Tyrol, so that's the Destination Management Organization, and we work together with the provincial government, so the Autonomous Province of South Tyrol. Furthermore, we have some smaller partnerships with local stakeholders and local working groups, and all of this combines into our monitoring system. So for the people who maybe do not know about this rather small area, we are an autonomous province in the Italian Alps, so up north, next to the Austrian border. It's relatively small, as I said. We have a little bit more over 530,000 inhabitants. And it's a little bit of an odd region, an odd area, because we have 3 official languages. This is due to our history and due to the fact that this region was part of Austria before the World Wars. So we have the official languages of German, which about 70% of people speak. We have the official language of Italian, which 1/4 of the people here speak. And then we also have Latin, which is a small language or a small language. We are maybe South Tyrol is known maybe for the Dolomites, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can see that here on the right bottom here a picture of these nice mountains of the Dolomites, and it's also because of the pretty nature that we have a lot of tourism here. The tourism sector directly accounts for about 11.4% of the total GDP in 2019. And you can also see in the arrival numbers of 2021 and last year, there are a lot of tourists in the area. Of course, 2019, like for everyone, we had a big dip. But in recent years, we again crushed every record. You can also see from 2021 to 2022, there was like a about almost 50% increase again in the arrivals and in the stays. I'm trying to be relatively brief with the introduction. This again only to show you a little bit our context and where we are. You can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor. We are here in the blue region, so it's a highly touristic area with a high presence of tourists throughout the year. We are currently working with 15 issue areas. Or our monitoring system monitors 15 issue areas. We have, of course, the mandatory issue areas where employment is also part of. And in green, you can see also the issue areas that we added or that we work on additionally. But today, obviously, I'm here to talk a little bit about the issue area 2, about employment. And I want to talk a little bit about where we get our data from and what kind of data we are working with. So to introduce the indicators that we are working with or that we are presenting also in our report, for the issue area 2 employment, we are presenting 3 different indicators. So it's the employees in the accommodation and food service sector, it's the female-led enterprises in the accommodation and food service sector, and the employees in the accommodation and food service sector by citizenship. So the indicator 2.1 and 2.3 are quite similar, or work with the same data source or the same databases, but are still different information. I don't think it's that important to go into the data itself or into the information about absolute values or changes. Just maybe for information, this worth knowing that about 32,000 people are working in the accommodation and food service sector per month. So it's a monthly average per year. Small sneak peek into our next report. This is just one graph that we are showing also in our report, which also slightly shows the seasonality of the tourism sector in South Tyrol. You can see obviously during the summer times it's higher. This can also be seen or observed with the employees, the number of employees we are employing. But it's, I think, more important to go into the data sources and the data that we are working with. We have, or in general, I have to say, we are in a quite fortunate situation in South Tyrol that there are many also local statistics on the tourism sector. On one hand, I have to say we are fortunate, but on the other hand, as I guess my colleagues also know, there is never enough data for us, but I'm coming back to that in a second. We work with secondary data only in this issue area, or primarily with secondary data overall in our monitoring system. And the two main sources, or the two sources for this issue area, is once the Amt für Arbeitsmarktbeobachtung, so it's the Office for Labor Market Monitoring, and the WIFO South Tyrol, so the Institute for Economic Research in South Tyrol. The data we are working with, or data we use for our indicators, are both collected by these two institutes. So it's they collect and analyze to some extent the data, and then give us access to it. A little bit more into detail maybe. So the Office for Labor Market Monitoring is responsible. We get the data from them for the issue for the indicators 2.1 and 2.3. So on the data on the employment or the employees in the accommodation and food service sector. We get the data from them because it is the central registration office. So every work contract which is signed in South Tyrol has to be registered at this office. So it's the central, let's say, gatekeeper of this information. This is regarding short-term contract and long-term contracts. Obviously, short-term contracts in the tourism sector are quite used, but both of the contracts are collected at this office. And the WIFO is connected to the Chamber of Commerce, so the local Chamber of Commerce in South Tyrol. It is kind of like the research department of the Chamber of Commerce. So it uses obviously data of the Chamber of Commerce, but also local statistics or local data from the local statistical office, which is the AStat, or the National Statistical Office, which is the ISTAT. So this to the data sources, but I will now get into a little bit on what kind of data we are looking at, or what kind of data we use for our issue areas. As my colleague before, the speaker before me, already hinted at, sometimes it's quite hard to collect data or to cluster data on tourism, especially on the employment sector, but also regarding the economic benefit. And when we thought about, or when we discussed the indicators for these two issue areas, so employment and economic benefit, we kind of made a compromise, or we compromised to the data that we have easily access to. I have to say that years before, some years before, the local statistical office, so the ASTAT, they had a big monitoring system in place, where or the tourism monitoring in place, where they accounted for, or where they observed and analyzed the direct and indirect impact that tourism has on the in South Tyrol. So it was also a more detailed account of the employee status in South Tyrol. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore, and we are trying to get this back in place. But it's for us, it's not doable because it requires a lot of resources. It would be doable for the local statistical office, but it's unfortunately not in a plan in the next years. So we compromised and tried to get as close as possible to, let's say, the tourism sector, or how tourism how we can describe the tourism part of the employment in South Tyrol. And we are using, therefore, we are using the classification of the economic activities in a European community by Eurostat, and I'm referring to the NACE document. To kind of like isolate the tourism connected enterprises. We're especially focusing on the section I, which is the accommodation and food service activities. On one hand, we have the accommodation and everything connected to that, and then also the food and beverage service activities. We are aware that obviously there are some, let's say gray zones, or there are some unclear zones within that, because not every restaurant or not every food and beverage activity is directly connected to the tourism sector. But for us, it's the closest we can get to at least get a grasp on what we want to look at. So what we do is we ask, or we get the data from the local data sources, again asking for the employments in these two sections, and then look at it. Once we just account for everyone who is working throughout the year in this sector, or in these two or with the two service activities. And then secondly, we also look at it from a more, let's say, analytical sense, or an analytical perspective, and look at it where the nationalities come from. And the second one is obviously the female-led enterprises. So the female-led enterprises we collect from the Chamber of Commerce, where every enterprise in South Tyrol has to be registered. So the information comes directly from them. I find it very interesting what the colleague before me said. It is always this, or we had this discussion. We have this discussion all the time when thinking about new indicators, and when we think about getting new data sources or new data. It's always a matter of what's easy accessible, and what we wish we would have. But we definitely try to at least nudge our local statistical office and our local institutes to give as much detailed accounts for data on tourism as possible, because obviously only then we can also give a proper view and analysis on this. I'm already over the time, so this was just only a very brief look at the indicators we use, the data sources we use, and what kind of data we use. But if you have any questions, you can always contact us. And I left the contact details here on the slide, and